You learned to read a room before you could read a book. You knew your mom's mood from the sound of her footsteps. You knew when to disappear and when to show up. You knew how to make yourself smaller so everything around you could feel bigger. You were never just a kid. You were a caretaker, a peacemaker, a problem solver. And everyone called it a compliment. So mature, so responsible, so wise for your age. But here's what nobody said out loud. You didn't choose that. You were trained into it by circumstances that never should have been yours to carry. Psychologists have a name for this. It's called parentification, or accelerated development. And it doesn't just describe your childhood, it describes the entire architecture of who you became. If you grew up too fast, if you skipped the part of childhood where you were allowed to just be a kid, this video is going to explain something you've probably felt your whole life but never had the words for. Here's what actually happened to you. Dr. Richard Weissbourd at Harvard University studied children who took on adult responsibilities early. What he found wasn't what most people expect. These weren't damaged kids. These were kids who developed something extraordinary under pressure, an accelerated emotional operating system that most adults spend decades trying to build. You became fluent in human behavior before your peers even noticed it existed. You could sense tension in a room, predict emotional outbursts, and navigate complex social dynamics, all before you were a teenager. But here's the part that nobody warned you about. That same operating system that made you exceptional also made it nearly impossible to just exist without a purpose, without a problem to solve, without someone who needed you, and now you're an adult who doesn't know how to rest. Let's talk about what this actually looks like in your life today, because growing up too fast doesn't stay in childhood. It follows you into every room you enter as an adult. Thursday afternoon, your friend texts, "Can you talk? I'm going through something." Before you even finish reading, you're already problem solving, already thinking about what they need, already preparing to hold space for someone else's pain. You don't even ask yourself if you have the capacity right now. Of course you do. You always do. That's who you are. Sunday morning, nothing urgent, no one needs you. And instead of feeling peaceful, you feel anxious, useless, like you're forgetting something, like you're only allowed to exist when you're useful to someone. That's not a personality trait. That's a survival pattern that never got the memo that the emergency is over. A study published in the Journal of Child and Family Studies found that adults who experienced accelerated childhood development show significantly higher rates of what researchers call chronic self-abandonment. You learn to put everyone else's needs before your own so consistently that you eventually stopped being able to identify what your own needs even were. And here's what makes this particularly exhausting. You're incredibly competent. People rely on you. You deliver every time. So from the outside, everything looks fine. More than fine, actually. You look like someone who has it all together. But wait, because here's what's happening underneath that competence. You're running on a nervous system that was calibrated for crisis. Your baseline is high alert. When things are calm, your brain doesn't trust it. It scans for the next problem. It manufactures urgency when none exists. Because calm meant something was about to go wrong. Calm was the quiet before the chaos. Psychologists call this hypervigilant nervous system response. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, whose research on trauma has been cited over 50,000 times, describes it as a body that learned to live in permanent preparation mode. Not because something is wrong with you, because something was required of you too early. You didn't develop this because you were weak. You developed it because you were exactly strong enough to survive what you were given. And here's something that makes this even more complicated. People who grew up too fast often struggle with what psychologists call identity diffusion. Because you spent so much of your formative years being what everyone else needed you to be, you never had the space to figure out who you actually were. Your peers were experimenting, failing, discovering themselves. You were managing, and now you're an adult who sometimes looks at other people's easy joy and wonders why it feels so foreign. Why relaxing feels like work. Why being carefree feels like a language you were never taught to speak. That's not a character flaw. That's a chapter that got skipped, and skipped chapters can always be read later. So what does this mean for you now? Because you can't unlive your childhood, but you can start understanding why you operate the way you do. And that understanding changes everything. First, the emergency is over. Your nervous system doesn't know that yet, but it's true. You are not responsible for keeping everything together anymore. You were never supposed to be. That was too much to ask of a child, and it's okay to finally put some of it down. The people around you now are not your responsibility to manage. You're allowed to just be present without fixing anything. Second, rest is not laziness. For people who grew up too fast, rest feels like a threat. Like you're falling behind, like you're being irresponsible. But rest is actually what your nervous system has been waiting for since you were 8 years old. You don't have to earn it. You never did. Sitting still without a purpose isn't failure. It's something you were never taught but always deserved. Third, your needs are not an inconvenience. You learned early that your job was to anticipate everyone else's needs. Your own were secondary or invisible or simply never asked about. But you have needs, real ones. Saying, I need help isn't weakness. It isn't burdening anyone. It's just being human. And you are allowed to be human even if nobody modeled that for you. And here's what nobody tells you about people who grew up too fast. The skills you built under pressure are real. The emotional intelligence, the resilience, the ability to read people and hold complexity without falling apart, those aren't just survival mechanisms. Those are genuine strengths that most people spend years in therapy trying to develop. You built them out of necessity. That doesn't make them less real. It makes them more hard-earned than almost anything else. You didn't lose your childhood for nothing. You built something in its place, something that has carried you through things that would have broken people who never had to grow up at all. The work now isn't to dismantle what you built. It's to finally give that kid who built it permission to rest, to play, to need things, to not always be the one with the answer, because that kid deserved a childhood, and the adult they became deserves to stop carrying it alone. If you grew up too fast, if you were the responsible one, the capable one, the one everyone leaned on, you're not broken, you adapted, you survived, and recognizing that pattern is already the beginning of something different. If this resonated, subscribe. We explore the psychology most people never talk about, and drop a comment. What's been the hardest part of growing up too fast? You're not alone in this. There's one more thing worth saying. A lot of people who grew up too fast spend years waiting for someone to notice how tired they are, waiting for someone to finally say, I've got this, you can rest now. That person might never come, not because you don't deserve it, but because everyone around you got so used to you being the strong one that they forgot to check if you were okay too. So if nobody has said it to you lately, you've been carrying a lot for a very long time, and you've done it without complaining, without asking for help, without letting anyone see how heavy it actually was. That's not weakness. That's one of the most quietly extraordinary things a person can do.